Hello. The previous activities dealt with the concept of safety. This video will introduce the way safety is managed. As safety is a subjective concept, several perspectives on it were introduced, leading to several approaches to managing safety. However, all these approaches are based on a common four-step framework: risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, and risk treatment. Let's recall the context. First, objectives are specified. The preservation of health and of environmental quality are two of them. Then an action plan is designed. When the design is completed, it can be executed and the objectives achieved. However, unexpected events may disrupt execution of the action plan. As a result, objectives are not achieved as planned. Risk is the potential consequence of this unexpected disruption in execution. In the field of safety, dreaded events are called accidents and negative consequences are called harms. The causes are called hazards. Safety management is introduced to control the risk of harms ahead of time, that is before T1. What has to be done to manage safety? This video will answer that question. The first step in safety management is to specify your goals. Safety management addresses the future. The first goal is to identify possible futures and especially risks. The second goal is to suggest which means can control the risks that could prevent us from achieving our objectives. The first step in controlling unexpected futures is to identify the risks. ISO 31000 defines risk identification as the process of finding and recognizing risks. These activities aim to provide a complete list of the potential risks. Once found risks are then described. This activity contributes to modeling risks. These models will serve as the basis for the next risk management steps. So risk identification needs to collect as many risks as possible. At this stage, we are not trying to judge how realistic they are. They are only potential. Often they stem from previous accident feedback. However, the future rarely resembles the past, and it is important to use your imagination to discover unexpected circumstances. Walking in the mountain is a risky activity which may lead to injuries. For instance, an accidental fall is one of the identified risks. However, the occurrence of such an accident depends on certain factors. When a barrier exists, this imagined accident cannot occur. The width of the mountain path also has a strong impact on how real the risk is. The risk analysis step aims to examine if the risks are real and to assess their significance with regard to the objectives. ISO 31000 defines risk analysis as the process to comprehend the nature of risk. The first purpose is to only retain the real risks. Risk analysis also determines the level of risks. So, the second purpose is to assess the significance of the risks. To determine how real an identified risk is or to assess its level, certain factors have to be highlighted. Amongst these, some will confirm the potentiality of risks or their significance. For instance, if the path is narrow, the fall may actually occur. Others will refute the potentiality of risks or minimize their significance. For instance, if barriers exist, people cannot fall. As a result, by the end of this step, some risks will have been removed, and the level of the remaining risks will be assessed. Risk identification highlights all the potential risks. It depicts all the potential unexpected futures. Risk analysis highlights the real risks, taking circumstances into account. So, risk analysis supplies the effective futures. This step also assesses the significance of the risks. Risk evaluation will outline the dreaded futures, determining which risks are unacceptable. ISO 31000 provides a way of deciding whether a risk is acceptable or not. Actual risks and their significance are compared to specific risk criteria to determine their acceptability. Let us consider the risks resulting from the risk analysis step. We saw that risk evaluation is the third step in risk management. Let's evaluate this first risk by comparing it with the risk criteria. If the impact of that risk on the execution of the action plan is admissible according to the risk criteria, then this risk is acceptable. Compare that with the second risk. Here the impact on the execution of the action plan is not admissible according to the risk criteria. Therefore this risk is not acceptable. Risk evaluation divides the risks into two groups, the acceptable risks and the non-acceptable risks. Risks which are not acceptable have to be treated. To control the future and make it acceptable, unacceptable risks have to be treated and rendered acceptable. ISO 31000 defines risk treatment as a process to modify risk. In the field of safety, modifying the risk often means reducing the risk. Risk is modified by adding risk controls. It's very important to point out here that these risk controls are only implemented during the risk management phase, which comes before the execution of the action plan. Without these controls, the risk is unacceptable. The presence of risk controls in operation renders the risk acceptable. Let's summarize the safety management steps. The safety management process starts by identifying risks. It aims to foresee future outcomes and especially to discover all potential risks. For instance, a gas tank is used to heat a house. A risk is that it could explode due to an overpressure and injure people. Risk analysis aims to foresee the real and significant risks. For instance, overpressure in a tank can occur when the supplier fills the tank. Since filling the tank is a frequent activity and a potential explosion devastating, the risk is significant. Risk evaluation aims to foresee future dreaded events and highlights the unacceptable risks. The explosion is not acceptable because it may cause fatalities. Finally, risk treatment aims to control the future. Risk controls are introduced to make unacceptable risks acceptable. For instance, the gas tank is equipped with a safety valve which releases gas when the pressure gets too high, preventing an explosion. Thanks to these 4 steps, risks are managed and objectives are achieved when the action plan is executed. Unfortunately, your job is not done. In particular, risk controls may introduce new risks. For instance, when the safety valve releases gas, people may get intoxicated or gas may ignite and cause injuries. As a result, these new risks have to be addressed by identifying, analyzing, etc. Okay, for the 4-step process for managing safety. The following parts of the course will introduce the means to implement each step using models, methods and techniques.